Thank you for joining us and welcome to today's webinar entitled Do Channel Rep Incentives Really Work? The Steps to True Loyalty in the Channel, hosted by Aberdeen Group and sponsored by Maritz Motivation Solution. My name is Lauren McCullum and I'll be your moderator for today. I'd like to take a quick minute to introduce our presenters on this topic. We have Peter Ostrow, Vice President and Group Research Director of Customer Management and Sales Effectiveness at Aberdeen Group, and Mike Spellecy, Vice President of Solution Thought Leadership with Maritz. If you'd like to view additional details about our speakers, you can do so by viewing the speaker bios. Simply use the drop-down arrow next to their name on your screen. And just a quick reminder, we'll take a few moments at the end to have a brief dialogue with our presenters via Q&A. I encourage you all to submit your questions using the Q&A field on the top left of your screen. In addition, our sponsor has included some additional key resources relevant to today's webinar topic, so please check those out. Visit the resources section on the bottom left of your screen to gain access to this content as well. It is now my pleasure to turn the webinar over to Peter Ostrow of Aberdeen Group. Peter, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Lauren, and welcome everybody. We have a very large crowd today, so it's great to see that a lot of organizations are interested in the answer to the title of our workshop today. Do channel rep incentives really work? I think you could probably guess that the answer is yes, but our job today is essentially to present some data. Both we and Maritz will be doing so to help you understand more specifically how do we get to the point and the place and that sort of nirvana where channel rep incentives are implemented and deployed and tracked and measured and ROI'd and effective so that our channel selling partners and our disparate audiences, all the VARs and VADs and franchisees and folks out there who are representing our best interests are doing their job and they're succeeding, and so are we. So I'd like to begin with just a couple of somewhat philosophical questions in these webinars, starting with basically just why are we here today? Is it to understand how channel rep incentives work most effectively? It is. The meaning of life in sales is more than just an answer online. It's actually getting into the nuts and bolts and the nitty-gritty, and that's what I, as your friendly neighborhood analyst, am here to help you guys understand today. So we're going to start our why are we here set of questions with a couple of data points for you just to get us started. And as I ask these questions of myself and present rhetorically the answers, think about your own organizations and whether or not your numbers tend to fit some of these when it comes to your channel selling environments. What we know from some recent research that we've done on sales performance management at Aberdeen is when we ask folks about what percentage of the people who are selling, channel sales reps, even direct sales reps, what percentage of their compensation overall is variable versus base. And as you can tell, the majority of compensation that's coming to the folks who are closing those deals on our behalf, who are representing our products and our goods and our solutions and services out there, is actually variable, which means that the base salary or the base compensation that we provide to our channel partners is actually a minority of where we need to be paying our attention. Then if we take the variable compensation portion and we break it down a little bit further and we ask what percentage of the incentives, everything beyond the base pay and the base compensation, are cash versus non-cash, here we have some interesting data. So 75% cash, it's almost higher, lower. What do you guys think? The point here is that the non-cash percentage of this non-base salary incentive compensation is still a very healthy 25%. That means that it's actually not all and only about money when it comes to talking to our channel salespeople, our partners, our franchisees, our VARs, our VADs, our resellers. We need to figure out what is the holistic way in which we can motivate these folks to give us the kind of line of sight, to give us the mind share, and to do the best possible work that will make win-win situations for both them and for us. So my final why are we here slide is kind of a little bit of an agenda for today, and it's not so much the order in which I'm going to present data to you, but some of the questions and concepts that we'll deal with. For starters, managing sellers is actually a very 21st century process. We've all seen the Glengarry Glen Ross movie and play, and the idea that all a channel seller or a direct seller or a timeshare seller needs is just a good script, a pile of leads, and a compensation package, and go off and go run and do your thing, and maybe you'll get the steak knives. That's very 20th century. We know from our research that the holistic management of individual contributors and channel partner companies is far more complex than just giving them the product, giving them the messaging, throwing a few advertising and marketing slicks and assets their way, and hoping that they do the dirty work while you sit back and enjoy the profits. The sales relationship management for our channel partners is far more complex, and we're going to go into some of those details for you today. Secondly, many enterprises, and probably most of yours for the folks, some of the names that I've seen on our attendee list, you live and die by the channel. You have an organization whose sales are predicated on having partners, one partner, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 partners. These folks are going to make or break your very existence. So it's important to recognize that there are ways and best practices that we'll talk about today that are most important to adopt so that you take good care of those folks so they could take good care of you. Because they have the choice not to take good care of you. They usually have, unless you have an exclusive relationship with these folks, the choice to simply ignore you and sell somebody else's product, your direct competitors, or whatever is the water finding its way to the lowest, most common denominator point of their sales environment. Because they have the choice to ignore you, you don't have the choice to ignore them. Secondly, again, after that, managing isn't just about managing and being managers. One of the things that we often see in my sales effectiveness research at Aberdeen is that there are a lot of tools and reports and applications and software and hardware that's all designed to give management in the sales world better insight into what's going on, better command of their troops, better reports, better data. No wonder people don't want to fill out the data forms in the CRM because it's just used against them to tell them they don't have a big enough pipeline. Better sales performance management results come when you think not just about the people who are managing the channel, managing the sellers, but the channel partners and the individual reps therein themselves. We need to make the experience of selling for you as enjoyable and as seamless and as friction-free as possible so that these folks get up every day and say, I want to sell for that organization. That's going to pave my fastest way towards the largest commission check. And then a couple of other reasons we're here are thank yous. One is facetious, it's Mark Zuckerberg, and the other one is realistic, and that's B.F. Skinner. Zuckerberg, obviously, we know this is the 10th anniversary of the founding of Facebook. We're all on there, or maybe we're on there right now while we're supposed to be doing webinar attendance, who knows. But the fact that social media has become such a strong part of everyday life means that our channel selling partners and their customers are far more in control than they ever were before of what we provide to them, of the price of our solution, of the choices that they have in buying, rather than us controlling the sales cycle. So that's a facetious thanks a lot to Zuckerberg, but a legitimate thanks a lot to B.F. Skinner. And we're going to talk a little bit, and I know Mike will definitely go in to some of the neuroscience and the behavioral aspects that come from a real deep study of sort of human behavior and how we react to situations. This is super important in understanding how to motivate and incent and especially to engage our channel selling partners. So what we're going to do now is take a look at the data. My job is to be a kind of your resident geek here. What we do at Aberdeen is we collect lots and lots and lots of data. Many of you folks may have taken our surveys. We're going to do one actually in a couple of slides. And what we do with our surveys is we collect two kinds of information. And that information is performance and behavior. The performance is all, hey, how does your channel partner population perform for you? How do they do against quota? What percentage increase in the overall deal size or decrease in the sales cycle are you experiencing as a result of your channel's efforts? And then we look at their behavior. What are the best practices that these companies adopt? What are the strongest performing sales organizations doing to motivate and engage and incent their channel? What are the actual products that they buy? So then when we compare the performance and behavior, we start to get all of our results. Before we go into those results that are segregated by our best-in-class and average and laggard performance cohorts, though, I just want to set the stage a little bit, and then we're going to do our poll, and then I'll hand it over to Mike for a little while. First, we're going to talk about, from our sales performance management research data set, what are the pressures? We always start our research questionnaires with, what's keeping you up at night? What's getting in the way? What are the friction-creating obstacles that prevent sales excellence? In the case of this particular set of data where we're looking at sales performance management and channel sales enablement and partner activities, it's all about a forest and trees conundrum. You see, a lot of organizations know that they need to hit their number, and they reach out and they put all sorts of channel partners in place, hoping that at least someone in the batting order will eventually hit a home run. But what they fail to visualize is how we make each and every channel partner at least as successful as they possibly can be. So when we look at the top pressures that our survey respondents tell us are keeping them up at night, the first and somewhat no-brainer one is good that it's top of mind, which is we're not growing revenue fast enough. Some of the others are actually significant as well. forecasting is becoming more and more significant as we as sales leaders need to interact with and collaborate more with the other line of business leaders in our company. If we sell more or less than we say we're going to sell, that actually hurts the folks in the supply chain, in logistics, in human capital management, because of the raw materials and the just-in-time hiring type of mindset that those folks live in. Our sales cycle is too long is another top pressure, and the old lead conversion rate. Who runs a channel that has never heard complaints from their reps out there saying, you know, we're not converting enough leads, the leads aren't good. So if these are the things that are keeping people up at night, let's take a look before our poll at some of the actions that all of our survey respondents are taking. Around sales performance management, most of the actions really have a flavor of, let's make sure that we don't, in a monotonous, autonomous way, treat every rep and every channel partner and every VAR exactly the same. Everybody's an individual. It takes all kinds to create a world. It takes a village, if you will. Little South Park reference as well. And these are the top actions that our survey respondents say they're taking to create more sales effectiveness within their channel. The number one on the left here is understanding and replicating the characteristics of our top sales performers. It may seem like a no-brainer, but how do we do that? The way we do that is we start to look at the behavior that is exhibited. What are the best practices? What are the habits? What are the technologies? Maybe not the technologies we've purchased for them, but the technologies that have spread virally and socially amongst our sales rep channels that are actually working. How do we then incent our other folks, the B players, the C players even, to try to move up that success ladder by replicating some of those characteristics? It can be through incentive programs. It can be through a lot of different choices. This, in fact, then brings us to the next couple of top actions companies are taking, making sure that we give managers all the tools that they have available to them. That's what Michael talked about, to build and develop those disparate sales teams. Productivity and ramp-up time is absolutely crucial. And then, of course, here we have, towards the right-hand side, the old gamification and game mechanics content. Now, this at 28% may not be as high as the others, but I got to tell you guys, this is about 4 times what it was a year ago when we did our research. So game mechanics, the sort of modernized version of what we're seeing in the old days were sales contests, for instance, are definitely taking a lot of root. So Lauren, what I'd like to do now is do a little bit of a precursor of where we'll be for our best in class. And if you could load my poll, we're going to ask everybody who's joined us today to answer this question. You guys can go ahead and start picking the radio button that works really well for you. So how did you guys do last year? That's the entire poll question. There was one number that your entire enterprise, channel, inside, field, account managers, everybody were supposed to hit last year. Was it 1 million? Was it 20 million? Was it 150? Was it 1 billion? How did your entire enterprise do? Were you over quota? Were you 91 to 100, 81 to 90, et cetera, et cetera? Some of you may answer that we were actually at 50% or less than total quota. So the reason for asking this question is I'm just going to hedge for a couple of moments here, let the rest of the results come in, and then I'll ask Lauren to show the results, is after Mike's next piece, I'm going to show you guys what your peers, your competitors, and your contemporaries, if you will, within Aberdeen Research are telling us in terms of how they did against quota, as well as some other metrics. And then I'll go on to basically say those strongest performers, let's take a look at what those guys are doing, and let's try to emulate those best practices. So Lauren, great timing. So most of you folks were kind of in that good to pretty good range. 14% of our respondents beat that number. I'm very pleased to see that some companies are out there. At the way bottom, we've got 5% of you said that you were 51 to 60. No one was less than half, and the biggest number was 91 to 100. So that's pretty good. I'm actually glad to see that. For the 86% of you folks who were not over 100% of quota, clearly you may have done reasonably well, but you could have done better. And I think when we come back to our presentation, you're going to see some very concrete examples of how best in class, the strongest performing companies are getting to that point. So before we get to that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike for a little while. And Mike, go ahead and take it away.
Great, thanks, Peter. This is Mike Spellecy with Maritz Motivation Solutions. And as you might imagine, because we are in the motivation solution business, we do have some representative data that would indicate that channel incentive programs do in fact work. But despite that fact, we felt important to validate, if nothing else, but more importantly to learn about what the view of the channel itself was around channel incentives, and particularly channel rep incentives. So in 2013, we did a study to determine just that. We have a research arm of our company, and the research company developed and implemented this survey. And there were 138 variables, and by that, there were 138 opportunities to indicate some sort of interest, preference, or answer. 8 of those were open-ended. It was a web survey, and it was panel sourced with blind distribution. Basically, what that means is that we got the mailing list. This wasn't our existing clients or potential clients. This was a mailing list that came from an outside firm, and the outside firm didn't know who they were developing the mailing list for. There were 1,008 completed surveys, and participating were owners, managers, and reps. The largest group of the participants was channel reps. And as you can see, there were a number of verticals, everything from appliances and automotive to telecommunications, office equipment, heavy equipment, construction, computers. So it was really a pretty diverse and widely varied population that responded to the survey. So to answer the question that Peter kind of gave away the answer to early on when he indicated that, yeah, we wouldn't probably be doing this if the resounding answer to whether or not channel incentive programs, particularly channel rep programs, work is yes, they do. And to that point, let's look at some of the data that will give us an idea of what's going on. One of the first things we did learn, and I'll address this again in just a minute, was that these programs do indeed work, but if you're going to play this game, there are certain things you need to do and do well. There are better ways that you can do things that will engage reps. And one way or the other, you better stand out, because if you aren't already there, your competitors in many cases are. So let's look. The programs work, yes. 77% of respondees reported that programs have a high influence on their selling, either very high or high. They answered 4 or 5 on the quiz, and that was whether or not a manufactured sponsored reward or incentive program had an impact on their willingness, interest, and or energy to sell the sponsoring manufacturer's products and services. So yeah, they do in fact work. They also have a high impact on efforts. So yeah, the reps in particular indicated that they were interested in these types of programs, but also that more than 3 in 4 reps put at least 75% effort to succeed, and the average effort expended against this program was 80%. So yeah, they think the programs work, and in fact, they truly believe that the effort that they give in these programs that they put forth is significant. But I think most importantly, they also believe that the manufactured sponsored channel incentive programs have indeed a positive impact on results, right? So yes, I'm aware of it. Yes, I'm doing something about it. And yes, I'm having results. There were 3 elements in results: location sales, team sales, and personal sales. But as you can see, right around slightly more than a third, even closer to 40% of their overall effect of their results was attributed to the program itself. Now, to the point I made earlier with that goofball standing there who didn't dress in the same kind of suits that the other folks did, there are a lot of programs out there, so foundationally you need to stand out. What this basically says, if you take a look at it, is that 70% of the folks who responded to the survey had at least the opportunity to be in 2 programs. And there were 23% who could be in 6 or more. So there's a superior amount of clutter out there. They know who they're working for, and who they're working for, in the case of a rep, is not the sponsoring manufacturer. Rather, there are a number of sponsoring manufacturers that this rep can choose to sell, and they all, or many of them, have programs in place. There's a lot out there, and the reps know about them all. When we kind of surprisingly, we asked how fully informed the reps were, in particular, about the competing programs that were out there for their mind share. They were a significant percentage, 67% were really very well informed that the programs were out there and what the programs offered, what they had to do to earn, etc. We'll talk a little bit, and Peter pointed out we have a certain point of view as it relates to what kinds of factors motivate individuals in any type of environment, be it selling or other. And there are a number of drives that can be put in play at any given time as it relates to what we do, what motivates us to do things as human beings, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. One of those drives, though, is the drive to defend, and it strongly exists in the channel. By that I mean it's very important that the program you put in the channel is perceived by the individual who's in the program to be fair and reasonable. That what you're asking me to do not only is something that I can in fact attain, but what you're offering me if I do it is I perceive it to be fair. So that's critical, because I tell you what, one of the quickest ways to demotivate or disengage someone in your channel is to either ask them to do something that is not perceived to be achievable, or to ask them to do something and offer them something they don't perceive to be equitable as a result. So there is that drive to defend, which we'll explain further in the channel. Reps strongly prefer individual learning opportunities. I don't guess that's too surprising. About 70-30 would just as soon have whatever incentive program they're in be based on how they do, not how their sales team does or how others do. And I would say that the key here is we asked about how do you like to be communicated with? What kinds of ways do you like to receive information about the program you're in? 80% said they preferred email. If you can see that, it's kind of hard to read, at least on the one I'm looking at. But the first, second, and third preferences there added up to 80% saying, yeah, I'd like email. That's what I really like. If you look more closely, however, and that's what we mean about make sure you read everything and listen to everything they tell you, of the email they say they want to get, 6 in 10 are at risk of not reading it at all. 9% regularly just delete everything they get. And about 50% will skim the headline to see whether it looks as though it's something of interest to them, and if not, they'll just delete it up front. What we have found, just by way of information here, is that in all the different types of studies that we've done with individual participant groups within our existing programs, what we really found is that there's a preference for some sort of communications mix. So even though folks will tell you they really would like to have email just totally, you're probably better off mixing in all kinds of different things, whether it be print, whether it be some sort of social media communication, whether it be your website, whether it be game mechanics and things that Peter will discuss in a bit. Mix it up a little bit. Don't stick with just one. Gift cards, merchandise, and cash are the rewards most frequently offered. This was a little bit intriguing to us. Frankly, we felt that there might be more cash in the channel as an incentive, but there turned out to be. Non-cash only, 41% of the respondents were in programs that offered nothing but non-cash or some sort of filtered debit vehicle. A combination of cash and non-cash was 53%, and then cash only was 6%. So foundationally, that was a positive, obviously, for us, given the things that we do. 78% agreed that the types of rewards and incentives they have an opportunity to earn are meaningful. This kind of plays into that same drive to defend thing I was talking about earlier, that motivator that helps to get people engaged, or at least eliminates the opportunity to disengage them. 78% either agreed or strongly agreed that the rewards and incentives they're being offered by the individual competing manufacturers are meaningful, and they are something that these folks who are in the programs do indeed value. This kind of surprised me anyway. The bigger rewards for higher effort were favored. We asked them, would you rather have a smaller reward without too much of an increment being requested of you, or would you rather go for something big and just see what you can do with it? And the dominant response was one that indicated that individual reps in particular would rather work harder for a bigger reward than they would not work as hard and get a smaller reward. And then also one thing that was maybe a bit of a surprise in that it was this direct. They strongly indicated that they're more than happy to have the manufacturer's rep make calls with them. A lot of times you'll hear that not be the case, or you'll hear that there'll be some kind of issue within the channel where there's feedback that says, I don't need your reps going in with my people, they can handle things. Well, from the rep standpoint, they very much would just as soon have the opportunity to have the manufacturer's rep go with them. So, net, this is kind of an overview of the primary points of what the survey showed. I think it shows a fairly foundational interest in and engagement with these types of programs. It also gave us some best practices. And what we're going to do, Peter's going to come back here in just a second. And then when I come back after Peter, we're going to talk about what best practices are, what table stakes really, if you're going to be in this kind of environment, if you're going to run a channel rep incentive program or a channel incentive program, here are the table stakes that you need to do just to be able to compete. And then we're going to take you through 5 steps that we believe will be ways that will help you to build true loyalty in the channel and will help you to really truly engage those people who are critical to your business success. So with that quick overview, Peter, I'll turn it back over to you, and off we'll go.
Thanks, Mike. Just a reminder, everybody, as Lauren indicated, we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. We've had a few come in, but the more the merrier, and we will also try to answer for anything that we don't get to one-to-one post the event. So, Mike, what I really like hearing from your presentation there was the concept of perception. It's so important for our channel sellers to perceive us as engaged, as caring, and to understand that the relationship is only going to yield as much as we put into it. So we had the survey that I conducted with you folks a few minutes ago, and we found out sort of where you fit in terms of that one metric. How did your organization do against quota last year? I think something like 14% beat the quota, which is great, and that meant that 86% didn't. Let's take a look now at the top performing companies in our research. Here you can see that the top performers were just about at that number, 99% of that overall corporate sales quota number, and 75% of reps or channel partners hit their individual quota. Those are some pretty strong numbers. On a year-to-year basis, those companies grew a very healthy 13% in revenue, and they slowed down, well, they shrunk actually, and they improved their sales cycle by diminishing it by 3.3%. So those are some pretty good numbers. Now, if you folks who are joining us today can honestly think, geez, you know what, I'm actually hitting all of those numbers, well, congratulations. You are actually in the elite. You are in the top 20%, and you can think of yourself as best in class. And I don't know, maybe you don't need to listen to what Mike and I have to tell you today, but you probably joined us for a reason. If you're hitting these kind of numbers, the industry average numbers, or if you have these kind of numbers, the laggard numbers, these are pretty bad. These are the averages, again, for the top 20%, the middle 50%, or bottom 30%. So about 49 companies, 120 companies, and about 80-something companies. These are the average performance results. So I'm dwelling on this for one reason. Much of what I'm going to show you from this point forward is all about what are the best-in-class companies doing, buying, using, and deploying that the other organizations are not as often doing so that help them get to these kind of numbers, and how do we actually look at some of these specific activities that they're taking, and how do adopters of those activities perform? So let's start. Number one, basically, how do I incent my channel? And here we have some great results that are going to talk to us a little bit about what is the bait that I can use? How do I fish for the best results? Here you go. So starting from the left, let's make sure that beyond the commissions that we pay to the sales team members themselves and the channel partners themselves, it's not just reps, but the entire organization in the channel partner or other job roles in the enterprise that are actually receiving some sort of financial reward. Again, moving to the right-hand side, dedicated resources, even almost regardless of company size, to managing comp and incentives for the channel. The third one here is kind of interesting. So you see, obviously, for the most part, we have the best-in-class in the Northwest and the average, and then the laggards down in the Southeast. Even presenting this data here, non-cash incentives are a crucial, vital component of overall management of our sales organization. We don't have exactly that clean result. That doesn't bother me as a researcher or as a presenter of data, because still we see that the majority of best-in-class companies are on board with this concept, and not even half of all other companies are in agreement. And on the right-hand side, let's also remember that non-financial incentives, they're not as popular overall, but the gap between the top-performing companies in the blue and the worst-performing companies in the red is very, very significant. So what I'd like to do now is to take a deeper dive into a couple of these items, and now we're going to take a look, just for the moment, not at best-in-class top performers who are reducing the sales cycle and growing revenue and everything, but different cuts where we look at adopters versus non-adopters, or users versus non-users, if you will. In the red here are all the companies that tell us we have a dedicated human being or human beings who handle all of our incentives for our channel, all of our compensation, et cetera. And don't think that that's just a function of company size. These companies are a little bit bigger on average, but they have far more resources because it requires that kind of attention. On a year-to-year basis, as you can obviously see, they are improving their metrics. They're growing deal size, quota attainment, customer retention, and they're doing better at controlling their sales cycle than the companies on the other side in the blue-purple who are not dedicating a channel comp or incentive resource, individual or people. Here's another different kind of cut, comparing companies whose compensation management system includes all of their channel partners. A lot of you guys probably have both on-staff FTE sellers and a channel ecosystem. Can you use the same system to actually pay them both and reward and compensate them both? You can, and you should, because these organizations do better around quota attainment as a team, quota attainment on all reps, and even the percentage of first-year reps and first-year channel partners who are hitting their numbers. Pretty compelling data. At least if you're a data geek like me, they are. So, does anything matter besides money? Come on, Peter. Is this all that matters? It's just show me the money. What's my plan look like? Stay out of my way so I can make my number. Well, yes and no. Something matters besides money. We asked the best-in-class companies. Remember, these people are hitting 99% of their number. 75% of the individuals and channel partners hit their number. Growing revenue, shrinking the sales cycle. What are the top 3 most important motivators of sales excellence within your enterprise? Most people told us that one of the top 3 was individual financial compensation, and we get that. However, let's take a look at what that data looked like just a year ago. 2% of best-in-class companies neglected to mention individual financial compensation as one of the top 3. That 2% is now 24%. People are much more cognizant of the fact that recognition and a sense of competition, team-based compensation, employee engagement, et cetera, these are all part of the mix. Now, again, I'm the analyst here. I have a little bit of godlike power over the data that I present. I can't make up the data, but like a reporter, I can choose which facts to report. If this was simply a y-axis scale of 0 to 50%, and we didn't do money on here, it would simply be recognition and team compensation and engagement. These are the things that are important in addition to money. But I wanted to share that because, yes, money is by far the most important motivator, but it's a huge mistake to think that the care and feeding of our channel partners is limited to just the financial. Hopefully that point is made clear enough. So we talked a little bit earlier about gamification or game mechanics, which to me is a more accurate phrase. Got a couple of slides and a couple of presentations of data here. Earlier we referenced our friend from the psychoanalysis world, B.F. Skinner, and the behavioral psychology world. He taught us a lot about motivations and how people react positively to things that they like. And so when we motivate salespeople, here is what game mechanics users are doing when they implement not just sales contests, but holistic ways of motivating the behavior that they desire, short-term, medium, long-term, etc. The care and feeding of your channel requires an acknowledgement that selling a more of a specific product or service during a specific period, as well as achieving traditional sales numbers. You're going to get something extra because you did your job, or because you did better than your job, you're going to get something extra. Those are the top 2 ways in which game mechanics users are trying to motivate and incent and reward the performance that they desire from as many of their sellers and channel partners as possible. Collaboration, a sense of competition, using game mechanics to motivate learning and adoption and use of marketing assets, even making sure they enter data in the CRM. These are the top uses of game mechanics elements. Here we take a look at some of the things that are the most and not so most important amongst game mechanics users. Clearly, the idea of a leaderboard or progress bar, that's really ingrained in our culture. Think about all the numbers that we like to look at. How many more retweets did Ellen's Oscar picture get than Michelle and Barack Obama's re-election tweet? 700,000 to 3 million. Look at all the maps and data points that we like to look at on TV when Nate Silver does his elections prediction. March Madness is almost upon us. We like to see visual representations of success. It's baked into our culture. Personally, I'm a visual learner and I'm a research analyst, so it kind of goes in hand. Some of the other things, the virtual dollars, skills and companies, that's fine. Badges for the sake of badges, not so much. We're not really recommending those. And then finally, here's a slice of data that compares the performance of users versus non-users. In the red, everybody who says, yes, Aberdeen, we use game mechanics and contests to motivate short-term behavior amongst our channel sellers and our salespeople. And in the blue, purple, I guess, no, we don't. You guys, you can see the data right here. All of the 3 different quota-oriented metrics and even customer retention are better results from the companies who are deploying game mechanics. Get your hands on this stuff. It's good stuff. All right, so rewards and satisfaction actually go hand in hand. And believe it or not, in the world of channel partner enablement, you can and they can get satisfaction. This guy's getting pretty old. All right, here we actually have 2 different presentations of data in one slide. On the left-hand 2 bars, how happy is your sales organization? And on the right-hand 2 sets of 3 bars, how happy is your sales organization with how much money they make? As you guys can obviously see, the weight is towards the happy. we're all kind of in our happy place. I guess, I don't know, Pharrell Williams should be singing the song right now. But more telling is look at the V-shapes between the best-in-class, average, and laggard companies. The companies who are shrinking revenue, growing sales cycle, 20-something% of reps hitting their number, those companies are far less likely to report satisfaction with comp and overall satisfaction with doing their jobs. You can buy happiness, but you do it with an ROI that says we're going to hit better numbers by creating a satisfied or highly satisfied workforce, people who appreciate what we do for them and who believe that they are fairly and equitably compensated, both financial and non-financial. This leads to some of the best practices that we see when we look at partnerships. How do we create the ultimate equitable partnership between us and our channel partners? These are the things that best-in-class companies tell us they excel at, whereas the average, and especially those laggard companies, are just simply not as good at. Even all the way over on the right-hand side, a minority of companies tell us that their partner incentive program has a positive performance on the performance of the channel. But best-in-class companies, they're about 30% more likely than the average companies to tell us that that's the case, and they're the only one where they're in the majority. Visibility, mind share, effective collaboration, supporting our messages, these are all the best practices that your channel partners need to do to make you successful. In order to get them to do that stuff, you need to find a way to motivate and engage and incent that type of behavior. So just before I wrap up, just a couple of factoids about partner ecosystems that we've got from our research at Aberdeen. Sometimes these mechanisms can be very, very complex, and it's almost hard to make heads or tails out of it. Here's some data to hopefully clarify things for you. Among best-in-class companies, they tell us that 62% of their partners are actively engaged in selling their solutions. That number is almost half as much amongst the laggard and worst performing companies. These enterprises are working very, very hard. They are not working very, very smart. On the other hand, let's take a look at a little bit of a southwest to northeast trend. What's your partner ecosystem look like when it looks at the number of channel partners per $1 million in annual revenue? The laggards have well over 2,000 partners just for every $1 million in company revenue, and that number is far less for both the average, actually, and the best-in-class companies. We need to find a way to look objectively at our channel partner population, at that entire ecosystem, figure out where are we likely to get the most traction with the most number of high performers, and whether we're awarding them Olympic medals of membership and the gold, silver, bronze partners, whatever it might be, or whether it's the trips that we dangle in front of them, whether it's the gift cards, the incentives, we need to use these tools to more effectively winnow in and out the channel partners who are going to make the most money for themselves and obviously contribute the most to what we're doing. There is a payoff for all this. Best-in-class companies, the companies who are doing so well on hitting their sales numbers, growing their revenue by 13.1%, shrinking that sales cycle by 3.3%. Imagine if your sales cycle was 3.3% shorter, just with a snap of the fingers. How much more money your company would make this year? Look at all of these metrics where the best-in-class companies are so much more successful in finding, onboarding, training, recruiting, retaining, and gaining participation or active selling from their partner ecosystem. So if you guys want to be able to achieve excellence in these types of areas of metrics, you're going to do what the best-in-class companies are doing. You're going to dip into the worlds of game mechanics and incentives and motivating and engaging your employees. You're going to use the tools that are at your disposal to do so. From my perspective, that's actually the end of all of my charts and graphs. I kind of consider it my mission to help sales organizations work smarter, unlike this monarch right here. But from that perspective, I'll be wrapping up, and Mike, I'll send it back over to you.
Terrific. Thanks, Peter. So, as I mentioned before, we're going to talk about if you're going to play in this game, if you're going to have an incentive program in the channel, particularly if you're going to have an incentive program for channel reps, what are the basic things that you have to do to even engage? Well, first of all, you got to get involved. The programs do in fact work. So if you're not in the game and your competitors are, that's the point of some difficulty down the line. You need to communicate well. I've often found it interesting that if somebody is offering you an incentive to do something that's really part of what you would normally be doing for a living anyway, you still need to communicate it often and well. Well, yes, you do, particularly if you're competing with somebody else who's communicating with the same person, right? And make sure that, as I mentioned earlier, you do combine a number of different vehicles to communicate, because we all respond differently in different ways to different things. And even though we may well say, hey, electronically is fine, that's not necessarily what we'll always do and what we'll always read. We found a mix of cash and non-cash to be effective. So I wouldn't necessarily put everything that I do into a cash spiff. Generally speaking, I think if you have the right mix of cash and non-cash, you appeal to a broader base of the motivation and motivators within the audience, within the rep group that you're trying to motivate, and your opportunities for success are enhanced. Make the earning opportunity easy to understand. It's a slide I didn't use earlier, but one of the issues that came up in our study was that the programs that were viewed most positively by reps were those for which it was very obvious what I had to do to get what I was going to get. So make it clear and easy. You know, the relationship between complexity and results is inverse. So to that point, do this, get that works very well. That's really effective, particularly at the rep level. And manufacturers' reps, in some ways, surprisingly, at least to us, are seen as being helpful in making the final sale. So this indeed these are the table stakes. These are the things that you have to do to play in the game just in general. Here are 5 things that we think are best explored if your overall intent, as it is with everyone, is to generate true loyalty in the channel, to make sure that those folks think of you and at the exclusion of your competitors. We'll start in the middle there with that little graphic that talks about understanding people. In 2009, we developed the Maritz Institute in conjunction with a number of leading academic institutions, Harvard and Penn and Stanford and Washington University in St. Louis and University of Chicago, with the intent being, you know, Peter mentioned B.F. Skinner a couple of times. B.F. Skinner, you remember him from your college psychology class, right? The Psych 205. Skinner was the guy that had the behavior model, the antecedents, behaviors, and consequences, and if the consequence to your behavior is positive, it becomes an antecedent for you to do it again. We had based this, the incentive and motivation business had been based on B.F. Skinner and Abraham Maslow to some degree for a number of years, and the feeling that we had was that a great deal of work was being done in neuroscience and human motivation and what kinds of things really give us a better idea of what does in fact motivate people. So the thought was the more we can learn from the current academics, the better off we'd be. One of the things that came from that relationship is that's the graphic there. It's the 4-drive model of human behavior. It was developed by Nitin Noria and Paul Lawrence at Harvard. Basically, it says that there's more than just a positive consequence that gets us to do something, but rather we have within us all at varying times the drives to acquire stuff and status, to bond with other people, to create or to comprehend our environment, and then to defend those things that we've gathered. So knowing that those 4 drivers are in play at any given time for what a human being might be motivated to do, I think is excellent background when you're trying to determine what kind of programs you should put in place to incent and to motivate reps to represent your brand better. We've also, you know, we had all always learned that we were rational. I mean, people were rational. They would never do something that wasn't in their best interest. Well, no, sometimes people do things that isn't in their best interest because people are both rational and emotional. They are individual and social, and they are driven by multiple motivators. So net, what I think the first thing to do is to do a better job of working to develop an understanding of what human motivators are, and then how to best effectively use those when dealing with folks who might be responsible for selling your product in the channel. If we look upper left, put the participant at the center of the design process. Incentive programs are not manipulative, terrible things. They are good things. They're good for both the sponsor and the individual participant. We don't mean in any way that these programs in the past had not been a positive and good thing. No, they were. But rather, I think what we're saying here is that rather than look at an incentive program from the standpoint of how do we get these people to, or how can I make them, we got to get these reps to do. Let's start and look at it from the point of view of the rep, and then determine what is it that she wants to do anyway. How can I enable that in her behalf and then benefit from it? It's really, it seems a rather slight change of perspective, but I think it's pretty foundational. And all design for incentive programs needs to start with the participant at the center. The use of design analytics and predictive modeling is something that we believe is very beneficial from the standpoint of a well-developed incentive program. What we basically say is that let's determine who the most valuable reps are today, and based on their current behavior, who will be the most valuable reps 3 years from now. Then let's look at all the data we know about what those reps do, how they look, what what verticals they sell in, how much training they take, what kinds of calling mechanisms they use, and then determine using mathematics what are the traits of top performers. Then you can use your channel incentive program to create differentiated offers in communications which encourage all reps to exhibit the traits of the top performers. Lower left, we're talking about personalizing communications. You'd be amazing the impact personalized communications have in a program. And that means more than just changing the first name after dear from Tom to Bob or Alice. Rather, it means when I talk to you in whatever vehicle I choose to speak, I want to talk to you about your personal performance and the kinds of things that you can do if you continue to do well, or if you do something else that might be to your benefit, or you take some training that would be good for both of us. So foundationally, these programs need to speak much more than they ever have in the past to the individual about her performance and what she's doing now. And then finally, to a point that Peter made a couple times around game mechanics, game theory is really not something new. Leaderboards and progress reports and those kinds of things have been a part of incentive programs really forever. It's just that the use of appropriate game theory and the use of tactics and mechanics that can engage people in ways that we hadn't thought about before are really coming to the fore. And really a good and effective program, and one that's designed to create a rep that's averse to competitive offers, which really is the most loyal rep, is one that effectively uses game mechanics. And so that when you're designing one of these programs, look at it from the standpoint of if you were a game designer, how would you use this program to add additional mechanics that will help to engage those reps with your brand, right? So these 5 points, I think, are critical to making sure that your program stands out. Understand what motivates people and how to best make sure that your program represents that theory. Put the participant at the center in everything you do. Become a little more sophisticated than maybe we've been in the past. One-size-fits-all incentive programs are really a thing of the past. Let's think more about individual segments and sectors and develop incentives that are designed to encourage all reps to exhibit the most positive behaviors. Personalize your communications and make this about me, the rep, more than it is about you, the manufacturer. And then finally, find some other fun ways to engage me around your brand and get me to do some things with regard to how well you train me, what I know about what you're doing, the things that I'd like to know about your brand, and use that, I think, as an advantage for both of us. So there's your table stakes. There's what the research says. There's what we think you ought to do to stand out. And now I will turn it back.
Thank you, Mike. Thank both of you gentlemen for that in-depth look at the research, some related findings on channel rep incentives. We do have a few minutes, as I mentioned at the top of the webcast, to answer a couple of questions from the audience. Again, as a reminder, you can submit questions using the Q&A feature within the platform. I do see a few here. The first one actually is for Peter. Peter, this one came in and says, regarding gamification, a lot of my company's partners don't seem to take this kind of thing seriously. Is this more of a situation of marketing hype than reality?
Thanks, Lauren. Yes. How's that? Yes and no. There is a lot of marketing hype around gamification, and we do have to separate ourselves from the VC money that is in the hands of companies that want to sell enterprise solutions that legitimately are designed at helping us sell more. I kind of think of game mechanics as something that we've all been doing. There's very few SOAR organizations whose channel partners don't have access at times to some sort of a contest type of environment. It's just a matter of getting a little bit more scientific about it, understanding that the behaviors that we seek, whether it's the activities, the results that we want to motivate, the short-term motivation of a certain product or SKU or geography or flavor or whatever it might be, these can be very, very effectively motivated using some of these programs. Yes, the silliness factor kind of is there, but the thing that I like most about game mechanics is it taps into 2 emotions that are the strongest in sales professionals than in any other job role: competition and recognition. When it comes to recognition, I mean, we all have seen A players on our sales teams and A channel partners who beat their number every single year, and they go on the Hawaii trip every single year. What's left for those people? If they're a sales rep, they may not want to get promoted because they don't want to make less money in their boss's job. If they're a channel partner, they're there to be a lifestyle or better than lifestyle channel partner. But when we look at recognition, people really like to be recognized, even if they're hardened sales professionals. And the sense of competition, you know what, it's great. When I talk to some of the gamification providers and I say, what do you do in those situations where the best performing channel partners or reps don't think it's not serious to them, the answer is usually a good one. They don't have to participate. They already are participating when it's properly deployed in the enterprise. And when they start to see themselves not near the top of the list, they're going to do something about it, because sellers are naturally competitive. It's not just hitting my number, it's everything else. It's the company ping pong tournament that I so quickly lost the other day here at Aberdeen. It's the betting that we do on the Super Bowl or March Madness, et cetera, et cetera. So those types of emotions are ideal for game mechanics when it comes to professional sellers.
Great. I have another question here. This one is actually from Mike. How do you reconcile the cost associated with a channel partner's desire for a larger reward with a strong willingness to let the manufacturer's reps sell the deal?
I would, if I understand the question correctly, that's really a function of the determination of who calls on whom within a channel. Most of the clients that we see have direct sales forces that call on possibly the larger end user consumers of their goods and services, and then they'll have a channel that represents the rest of their brand. In this case, generally speaking, I think the determination needs to be made of who's going to call on whom, because one of the issues you find in the channel a lot is that a VAR, a reseller, a dealer, whoever, doesn't want to share any information with the sponsoring manufacturer whatsoever, because he's afraid that the sponsoring manufacturer is going to go around him to the end user. I think there needs to be a foundational clarity around who's calling on whom in a channel to make sure that everything has the potential to work best down the line. Because if you have the manufacturer competing with a dealer on a day-to-day basis, effectively, eventually, you're going to be left with the manufacturer himself trying to sell.
All right, I have another question that came in here for Peter. Peter, you mentioned the need to avoid having too many unproductive or non-contributing partners. What's a good way to use incentives to thin the herd?
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, most of you guys probably have your different tiers of partner, your platinum, gold, silver, et cetera, and that's good. Again, I think the sense of competition and accomplishment is a good way to treat the partner personnel, and the rewards that accrue to these folks if they move up the Olympic medal replicas does increase. What we can do with incentives, I mean, this may sound a little bit Darwinian, perhaps a little bit cruel, but I'm a huge believer in A/B testing, which is we do this scientifically. We go with our Spock and put away our Captain Kirk, and we look at our audience of participating partners, and we do an experiment, and we either look at a certain type of new product or an incentive program or some other variable that we use with a test group, and then we have a control group. You don't want to take a certain number of your sellers or partners and say, well, you're in the control group, so you're not going to get the benefit of this potentially life-altering technology or solution. So maybe we find a way to give those folks some relief in some other way. But that's the way we're going to learn. And that's the way you test out the technology or the solution itself. Then, once you know that it works, it's actually very easy to draw a correlation between the folks that are earning and deserving of those incentives and those who are not. It's still never a complete cut and dried solution, but I think it's a good way to begin a process.
Another question just came through. How do you ensure rewarding incremental sales and not run rate business?
Mike, you want to take that?
Sure. How do I ensure rewarding incremental sales? It's difficult to do in a channel, particularly if it's at the rep level, because the channel partner generally doesn't want the manufacturing sponsor assigning objectives to his or her employees. That said, there are program rule structures that can be put in place that involve performance plateaus, for example, which would indicate that yes, we will incent all of the sales of product X above a certain level, and that level can be based on at least an average of existing business across the board. One of the issues there, backing up a little bit, the only way you can make sure that a program is foundationally incrementally funded is to make it escrow-based and to say that you earn based on what you do all year long, but your points aren't worth anything unless my company hits its objectives. That's probably the foundationally worst way to do an incentive program. So if you can set it up with some sort of a plateau above which people will earn, but below which they won't. Generally speaking, though, we recommend, particularly in a channel environment, that that even though there's some activity that you're going to get anyway, as a matter of course, that you would now be incenting, you're likely better off from a competitive standpoint to go ahead and do that. And if you would like to, so in other words, you may pay for everything sold at X, and then above a certain plateau, you incented at 2X. So you're encouraging greater behavior beyond what had been an existing performance level. But it's really tough in a channel environment to have an incrementally funded incentive program. It's foundationally incrementally funded.
Well, we are getting to the top of the hour here, so that does bring us to the conclusion of our webinar. I would like to thank Aberdeen's Peter Ostrow and Mike Spellecy of Maritz for sharing their research, their insights, and some recommendations today. I'd also like to thank our audience for their interest and participation, and of course our webinar sponsor, Maritz Motivation Solutions. I hope you found this webinar beneficial, and we wish you the best wherever you may be.